All right, we will now talk about functions, okay? And so functions can either evaluate to a value, which means they return, typically, and or they can print something out to the screen or draw something on the screen in processing. Out or draw something or set an internal variable in a class, set a state variable in a class. And those would all be void. Okay? If it returns something, if it returns a value like an int or a double, that means that function call actually will change into that value post function. What does that mean? Okay, so I'm going to do the simplest one, right? We're going to write a function that adds 1 to a number, just to get understanding as to how it's going to work. Well, it's going to add 1 to a number and return the new number. So that type of function, so this is what the box of that function would look like. And we're going to call, we'd say add 1. It's a little machine, right? That's going to add 1 to a number. And we have an input, let's say 5, and the output would be 6, okay? And so this is the return value, and this is the parameters that are inputs. And here is where our function body is, and we have to determine what that is. So if we know the return value is an int, and that's the first thing we figure out, is we figure out the return value. So we say int. Okay. And then we have to have the name of the function. Well, so name it something that makes sense. I'll just call it add1. Then we have the parameter list inside. And how many parameters do we have? We just have 1. We're passing in 1 number. And that number is going to be an int. Param1 or whatever you want to name it, okay? And then the final thing is we're returning 1 plus that number. So we could say return par1 plus 1, okay? And now we can invoke this function from anywhere, and every time we invoke this function, this code will be run as long as we provide it with the correct parameter. If we don't provide it with the correct parameter, Java will scream at us saying, this thing takes in an int, you haven't provided it with an int, okay? And so if we said system, so what that means is that anything you would do with like a number, you could do with this, all right? This is like an integer number. It's add 1 will always become an integer number, okay? So if I say system.out.println and like literally put add 1 5 in there, okay, this thing will print out 6 because add 1 5 will go through this code, return parameter 1, which is 5 right now, which gets set to 5, right? So add 1 5 literally is going to pass 5 in for parameter 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. It's going to print 6 out, okay? Because all of this is going to be replaced by the number 6 after this code is run. All right, this will evaluate to 6, and so the program will jump down here, do the evaluation, and say, okay, that's 6, and now I can print this out. And it can't print this out until this evaluation is done, so it has to jump down to the function, just like goto in BASIC, right? That first language I told you, it jumps and then jumps back, right? All right. So now, what would a void function look like? Well, you've done void functions before, right? Our setters are all void. So you can definitely go look at that in, for example, the box class you just modified for the last project. You know, and you might also think that, well, every time I print out an array, it's this thing of for loops. Maybe I could write a function that prints out the array to console. Okay, so I'm gonna have you do that in the next kind of assignment thing. But you might think that that's gonna be a void because it's printing something out. Okay, and what should it take in? Well, what's it gonna do? It's going to process an array. So if it's going to process an array, go through everything, it better take in the array, right? And the output, and I'm putting it with a squiggly line because it's not returning anything, is going to be the console printing out the array values or whatever, okay? It's going to be something printed out. So at index 1, it's 53. At index 0, it's 53. At index 1, it's 72, whatever, okay? So that's your mental model for a void function, all right? And you might imagine that inside this function, there's got to be some way to go through every value of the array. Some way to go through every value of the array. Okay. Did not mean, and okay rhymes with that too. Did you notice that? That was off the top of the dome. That wasn't even written or anything. That was straight right up here. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so there's a few a few questions, and then a few projects. There's 2 on functions, and then I'll see you, and then that'll finish off this review, and we'll jump to the next thing, which is sorting.